You see, you are not dealing with your average Tomura anymore. He has become the legendary Super Tomura!
What do you think about this week's episode of My Hero Academia? Leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you shortly. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today and it will do them a power of good. We are very close to hitting our 64 subscriber goal. If we hit that goal, then I'll be doing a playthrough of My Hero 1 Justice for the channel once this season is over. We're so close. Just one more subscriber and then we will be there. But between then and now, on with the review. And so with this week's episode, we loop back around to more or less where we were several weeks ago. I don't mean that as a negative, I just really don't know how to start this week's review because there is a lot to unpack here, but we'll start off with the positives as I feel that is always a good place to start. This is an episode which continues the tragic descent of Tomura and showing us how he came to be connected with All For One. As I mentioned in last week's review and as part of the subjects and the comments from last week's review, which of course I'll be reading later on, all the while whilst we're just seeing young Tomura walk through the streets, I'm just sat there thinking to myself, you know, if only someone would help him, if only someone would stop this kid and help him out and give him the protection and the support that he needs in this trying time, rather than walking past him. Just all the while you're just hoping to yourself that someone will look back at him and just say, come on kid, what's wrong, what's happened with you, let's get you seen to. But of course you know that's not going to be the case because of how things turned out, and all the while you're just, like I say, you're just hoping that something good's going to turn around, that someone's going to turn around and help him, but that just doesn't happen. It's like watching a horror movie. You know that the bad guy's gonna chop one of the characters in the head, and you just sat there waiting for it to happen. You're powerless and have nothing to do to help save that person, so you're just gonna sit there and we'll just watch it happen. And all the while you're watching this young lad who's just gone through some unbelievably horrific, and people are just shrugging him off and walking past him or taking one look at him and not liking the way that he looks and just wandering past him. And it's one of those tragic realities of society, not just in My Hero Academia but also ours as well. And all the while again you're just hoping things will turn around. There's just this constant sinking feeling of depression and desperation that you have that only grows the more it goes along. And there's still that naive part of you in the back of your mind that's hopeful that maybe things won't go the way that they will do, and that maybe someone will go up to him and save him. But of course, as we all know, that doesn't happen in the end. We see how he's manipulated by All For One, we're seeing how he's tricked, how this vulnerable young lad is twisted and warped and reforged into this deadly weapon, which only becomes all the more deadly as the episode itself progresses. This week's episode doesn't have the same kind of gut punch to it as last week's episode did, mostly due to the fact of just how horrific last week's episode was. And that isn't really a negative of this week's episode, because there comes a point with any kind of writing, whenever it's a TV program, a manga, a comic book or whatever, where you can't just up the stakes week after week, because after a while it gets weak. You know, it just loses its impact, and this week we didn't have that because partly due to the pacing of this one, it wasn't structured in such a way that it didn't show us, you know, the descent of how Tomura just rotted away to become this evil husk. It showed us in short bursts, and whilst I feel that showing it over a longer period of time and just showing the descent as the whole episode would have been better, what we do get in this week's episode is fair for what it is, because it showed us everything that we needed to see. And maybe had the episode itself been 40 minutes longer, not 40 minutes longer, had it been 40 minutes in length and more time could have been spent to explore it, then yeah, it could have done that. But for what we get, it's sufficient for what it is. And whilst it doesn't have that gut punch moment as what we had last week, as I've said previously, it's just this dark, insidious, crawling, horrible feeling of just watching this young lad just get manipulated and turned on everyone else, and it's just a horrible thing to see. Again, because you know where all this ends up, you know about all the people that have fallen and gotten hurt as time has gone by. I have to say that I did find it interesting to see how Re-Destro had just descended over the course of this episode, where he's still at the start of it still defiantly trying to win the day, and then by the end of it he's more like Tomura's flunky, which this is either some clever bit on his part that he hopes he's going to help him win out in the end, he's going to get close to Tomura and stab him in the back, maybe literally or metaphorically, but in the end he just seems so mentally broken that he's just become such a crawler for Tomura. And to be fair, I can totally get it. If I was in his shoes, I wouldn't exactly be trying to piss Tomura off either, because that's a guy that can just turn you to dust without a single thought, you know? He just turns to this comically, almost silly flunky by the end of it, which kind of takes something away from his character by that point. And I have to admit that there was something about his speech that he was giving in the crater where I was expecting things to be different. For him to say something along the lines of, oh, we wanted to create a world where everyone could use their quirks freely. But seeing this boy in action, seeing the destruction that he has wrought on the world, I'm not sure if I want to live in that world anymore. There'd be some kind of internal conflict within him where he's starting to question the whole goal of his organisation. But we didn't really get that. He bowed his head to Tomura again, as one would expect, one would probably do, and gave up his control of him, which just shows how dedicated he is to his cause. Even if that cause is doing this, even though he's doing this in such a way that effectively turns this organisation, which has legitimate points of view, even if you don't agree with them, into what is essentially just an out-and-out villain group. As a whole entity, I thought that this was a solid episode all round. I can't fault too much of it because I feel that there isn't much at fault with it. It's very minor stuff as far as pacing and such is concerned, but at this point, you know, this is the penultimate episode of the season. What can you really do? You're very limited on time, and I don't think this is going to be a series where you are going to end this season on a villain victory note. Next week's episode, by the looks of things, it's just going to be setting up for the next stage, the next season when it comes along, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Again, all in all, solid episode, can't fault it all that much. Now it's time for Comment Corner! Our first comment comes from Emiya, and firstly they are correcting me on the correct pronunciation of their name, which is always welcome. If you do leave a comment with me and I get your name wrong, just leave me another comment to let me know that I've made a mess of it. Pronunciating things isn't my best thing at the best of times, especially when it comes to reading stuff off a script, but whatever. We move on to their comment. And their comment, the main part of their comment is about the subject of thematic mirroring. In last week's review, I commented about how interesting it was, how it seemed like Ari and Tomura were mirrors of each other. They both had similar backstories to them, and I was unsure if this was intentional or not, and it turns out it was. It was done as to be a subtextual link to similar tropes that you see within Western comic books, and I thought that there was a fantastic element to bring into play, and I was interested to learn about that. I am interested, as I say, to just see where all these characters end up with that in mind. Are we going to see some kind of flip at some point in the future where Tomura ends up being the good one and Ari is a bad one? Are we going to see them both redeem each other? Or is it just going to be this always step of, this is how Tomura would have ended up had he got a life like Ari's? We'll soon find out. Our second comment is from Scott TV Gamer back again, and this is in reply to Emiya's comment, but it further discusses the point of mirroring within My Hero Academia with some more examples of it, including one with Midoriya and All for One, which is another example which I honestly hadn't really cottoned on to, but that's mostly due to the fact that All for One hasn't really had much of a presence in the show recently. Certainly not since I've started doing these reviews, so looking at it on a deeper level hasn't been something I've had much chance to do, but I am planning to go back and rewatch previous seasons, so I'll just be able to explore that link myself as we get to it. I'm going back to rewatch them for future projects, because I intend to keep doing these videos once the season itself has ended. You know, I don't want it to be another thing of I don't do anything for about a year and the momentum that I've built up just fizzles out. But you know what, that's a whole other thing which we'll probably discuss in a couple of weeks' time. Our final comment comes from, and it's our most recent comment, comes from Ghostblades, who says that they never fought the Karai for Shirakari. I know I've got that name wrong, but hands up, I've had a long morning. And whilst I wouldn't say that I reacted the same way with last week's episode, I wholeheartedly agree. Last week's episode was brutally tragic. I was really not expecting to see what I saw at that time in the morning. And thankfully, it's not something that I saw this week or possibly next week, when I'm probably going to be ill from the side effects from my second jab for you-know-what, when I'd probably be an emotional wreck. So if something big, tragic and sad happens with next week's episode, and I'm starting to feel the effects of my jab, and I come on it going, I can't believe such a thing happened, you know that it's mostly due to the fact I'm out my head from having a bad reaction to what's going on. But whatever, that's a thing we'll cross when we get to it. Be sure to leave a comment for this week's episode, what you thought about it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below. You will be read out in next week's review. We are getting towards the end of the season, and in next week's video I will be asking you for your thoughts about the season as a whole, so just have a little bit of a think about it. Maybe if you want to leave some comments about what you've been feeling of it thus far, leave them down below. And what do you think about this whole My Villain Academia story arc stuff? Did you enjoy it? Did you think that it was a great addition to the lore and the structure of the show? Did you think it was a bit too much of a distraction from the main events? Let me know. And hell, maybe would you like to see a spin-off of villain-focused stuff? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you shortly. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!